Damn. 3 a.m. While the world was asleep, power was sweating. 6 hours of polished voices. 6 hours of fear dressed up as intelligence. 6 hours of men convincing each other they mattered. And then you spoke. Not loud, not long, not emotional. One word. And everything they built in that room collapsed inward like a dying star. That's not confidence, that's not luck, that's authority. See, weak people think power is volume. Strong people know power is finality. The council didn't lose because they were wrong. They lost because they needed 6 hours to reach a truth you carried silently. That's the difference between people who debate life and people who decide reality. Let me tell you something they'll never say out loud. Most rooms aren't led by the smartest person. They're led by the one who can end the conversation, the one who doesn't explain, doesn't negotiate, doesn't seek approval from trembling mouths. You didn't dominate them by force. You dominated them by certainty. Because certainty is terrifying. It exposes how fragile their titles are, how borrowed their confidence is, how temporary their power has always been. 6 hours of noise means one thing. They were hoping time would save them. But time only saves those who already have leverage. You didn't bring arguments into that room. You brought gravity. And gravity doesn't debate. It pulls everything down to the truth. Here's the part nobody prepares you for. When you become the person whose word ends things, people will call you cold. They'll say you're ruthless. They'll whisper that you've changed. Good. Because softness is a luxury for those who don't carry outcomes. The Joker doesn't scream. He smiles. Because he already knows how the scene ends. You see, real power isn't chaos. It's control so absolute it looks calm. That's why one word from you outweighed 6 hours of theirs. They were playing chess to survive the night. You were flipping the board. And don't get it twisted. This wasn't about ego. This was about alignment. Your word worked because it was backed by something dangerous. Follow through. People sense it. Animals sense it. Rooms sense it. The moment you spoke, the air changed. Not because of what you said, but because of what you were willing to let burn. That's the awakening. Most people never speak with that weight because they're afraid of the silence afterward. You weren't. Silence didn't scare you. Silence obeyed you. So if you're listening to this and wondering why your voice doesn't land, why rooms don't shift when you talk, why arguments keep dragging on, it's not your vocabulary. It's your hesitation. Decide first. Speak second. Accept consequences without flinching, because the world doesn't bend for people who need 6 hours. It bends for the one who walks in, looks at the chaos, and ends it with a word. Damn, that's not motivation. That's a warning. Become the voice that finishes things. Or spend your life arguing in rooms that don't matter. And here's the part most people will never understand. Once you've ended something with a single word, the world doesn't applaud you. It recoils. It measures you. It calculates how much it can push before you snap the board again. And that's exactly the point. Because power isn't about comfort. Power is about consequence. It's about being the variable no one can predict, the anomaly they all fear, but can't ignore. The council didn't lose because of noise or chaos. They lost because they assumed structure protected them. They assumed argument could contain the inevitable. They assumed time was their ally, and you didn't argue. You didn't negotiate. You didn't beg for consensus. You didn't waste a syllable proving yourself. You just existed, and existence became a verdict. Let that sink in. Most people spend a lifetime convincing others they matter. Titles, diplomas, handshakes, meetings, endless theater. But influence? Influence is surgical, quiet, relentless. It doesn't flash lights or demand attention. It forces reality to conform, and only a few ever learn that lesson. You walked into 6 hours of structured chaos, and with one word, you rewrote the story, not by volume, not by theatrics, but by alignment, by precision, by being fully prepared to accept the aftermath of your choice. That's why your word carried weight, because it wasn't just a word. It was a threat wrapped in inevitability. It was the unspoken message. Everything you cling to is temporary. Everything you defend is fragile, and I am not negotiable. Most people can't carry that. Most people need applause, validation, reassurance. They trade authority for comfort. They trade finality for social currency. But you carry silence like armor. You let the echoes of your single word haunt every thought in that room. And when you leave, the room doesn't return to what it was. It fractures, it recalibrates, it bends itself towards someone who actually means it. That is the definition of dangerous. That is the definition of unforgettable. That is why legends, villains, and those who leave marks on history never debate endlessly. They decide, and they let the memory of their decision ripple far longer than their presence. Here's the brutal part. When you operate like this, you don't get the comfort of sympathy. You don't get understanding. You get the weight of expectation. Every space you enter, every council, every room. It's not a question of authority. It's a test. How far will you let this room speak before you end it? How many hours will they pretend control is theirs before reality reminds them otherwise? And that's a terrifying power. It isolates you. It separates you from the naive, the weak, the loud, the desperate. You stop needing their approval because their resistance only proves your precision. Let me be perfectly clear. This isn't about cruelty. This isn't about proving a point to the world. It's about mastery. And mastery always looks cold. You've learned that now. That one word that ended 6 hours wasn't just a sentence. It was a mirror. It reflected who you are, calculated, aligned, fearless. And it reflected who they are, fragile, desperate, helpless. Power doesn't forgive hesitation. Power doesn't apologize. Power doesn't debate morality. It decides outcomes. And if you're not ready to carry the responsibility of that, the room will chew you alive the first time you try. But you were ready, and that's why your word worked. That's why everything they thought would survive dissolved in a heartbeat. That's why the council, their titles, their arguments, their schemes, all of it ended before it could begin again. And now here's the next layer most people will never understand. Once you've carried a word like that, you can't go back to ordinary conversations. You can't pretend to be casual. You can't waste words. Because every word from this point forward is measured against the one that ended 6 hours. Every room, every argument, every decision is now a stage where the memory of your precision precedes you. And some people will fear you. Some people will admire you. Some people will plot against you. That's fine. None of that matters. What matters is that you know your own weight, that your presence is enough, that your decision is enough, and that no argument, no delay, no pretense can match the gravity of a soul aligned with consequence. And finally, this is the last lesson most people never internalize. The world will try to seduce you into repetition, into over-explaining, into softening. They will whisper, "Take the time, don't burn bridges, be patient." And it will sound logical, reasonable, moral. But you already know better. Time is a weapon only in the hands of those willing to wield it. Patience is nothing to someone who already knows how to end the fight in one breath. Softness is death for those who carry endings. And now, after one word ended 6 hours, you have seen the truth. The truth is this: the rooms, the councils, the chaos, they all exist for one reason: to be decided. And you are the one who decides. And now, here's the part most will never survive hearing. The council is gone, the arguments are ghosts, the hours evaporated, but the lesson? It doesn't end there. You carry it forward. You carry it in your chest, like a bulletproof heartbeat, like a shadow that doesn't need to explain itself. Because once you've been the word that ends chaos, everything else is noise. And the world will try to drown you in it. People will flood your space with chatter, distractions, questions, endless what-ifs. They will beg for your opinion. They will plead for your consent. They will cling to your gaze for guidance they never had. And you will sit there, silent, smiling just slightly, knowing all the while that you already decide the outcome before anyone dares to speak. Most people call this arrogance. Most people label it cruelty. They misunderstand the kind of calm it takes to wield finality. Finality isn't loud. It isn't flashy. It isn't performative. Finality is surgical. It cuts without hesitation. It claims without apology. And it lingers long after the word has left your lips. 6 hours of debate, gone. Authority pretenders, erased. And the only thing left in the room is the weight of your presence, heavy enough to suffocate, yet invisible enough to terrify. That is the weapon few understand, and fewer still can control. Let me paint this for you. Imagine walking into a space and everyone, every single person, pauses, not out of fear of punishment, not because they respect a title, not because they are polite, but because they know you already won. They know you could end the conversation, end the argument, end their entire little world with a single perfectly chosen word. That pause, that suffocating moment of silence, it is more powerful than screams, more devastating than violence. That pause tells the truth. Control is not something you claim. Control is something the room gives you the moment it realizes it has no choice. And that, my friend, is where mastery lives. Power doesn't exist in noise, in spectacle, in negotiation. Power exists in alignment. Alignment of thought, alignment of intent, alignment of consequence. You spoke and your word aligned reality with itself. That is why one word outweighed 6 hours. That is why they shook. That is why they will remember. And here's the cruel twist. The world doesn't stop testing you after that. It escalates. It challenges. It stretches your patience, your restraint, your precision. Every room you enter now is another battlefield. And every battlefield, every council, every argument is a question. Can you do it again? And the answer, as it always has been, is yes. You can. But there is a cost. It is not financial. It is not physical. It is existential. You can never be soft again. You cannot indulge in hesitation. You cannot pretend that compromise is an option when what is required is inevitability. Softness, kindness, explanation. These are luxuries for the weak, for the undecided, for the 6-hour debaters. You don't get luxury, you get authority. And authority by its nature isolates, it separates, it makes you untouchable, but also endlessly watched. Every glance, every whisper, every movement around you becomes a potential test of your alignment. Some will seek to topple you, some will seek to mimic you, and some will simply fear you without ever saying it. That's fine. Fear is honest. Fear is clarity. Fear obeys. Here's the most important truth of all. When you carry the power to end chaos with a single word, You must accept that the world will try to distract you from it at every turn. It will offer noise disguised as counsel. It will offer compromise disguised as morality. It will demand you play their games when you have already rewritten the rules. And your responsibility, your heavy, unrelenting responsibility, is to stay aligned, to let others twist themselves into knots, while you remain the constant, unyielding axis upon which the room spins. You are not here to entertain. You're not here to argue. You are here to decide. And the memory of that decision will haunt, shape, and ultimately bend reality to your will, long before you even speak again. Most people crave comfort, approval, consensus. They are terrified of being alone in their authority. But you have walked the edge of silence and seen the world yield. You have spoken and watched 6 hours of debate collapse like paper in flame. You know now that hesitation is death, that delay is weakness, that indecision is an invitation for destruction to bloom. And you will never forget it, because memory is sharper than strategy, and once you've carried inevitability in your chest, every room you enter knows it before you arrive. So embrace it. Embrace the weight. Let it sink into your bones, into the way you breathe, the way you move, the way your presence alone bends reality. Let others speak. Let them argue. Let them believe they have control. And then, when the moment is right, speak once, just once, and watch. Watch as time, patience, ego, and chaos crumble under the pressure of your certainty. Because you are not here to participate. You are here to conclude. You are here to decide. You are here to end the debate before it begins. And when you do, the world doesn't thank you, it obeys. And obedience, my friend, is the truest applause there is.